Hey everybody, Matty Ice here. Today I'm going to be going through the midweek TWAB, or just, ability preview that's coming out. This is going to be for Season 21, Season the Deep, that's coming soon. So the next couple weeks we'll see a lot of these changes come through. I've kind of skimmed through this, but I haven't really gone to it in depth before. And this is kind of the first video style like this that I'm making. So if you enjoy it, please let me know. I would greatly appreciate it if you could like the video, subscribe to the channel. But yeah, let's get into it here. So starting out, like I said, Season 21, making a lot of ability changes here. Most of it seems to be focused on PvE, which, Destiny is a PvE game, so that kind of makes sense. A little bit is kind of PvP based, but yeah, we'll get there. So starting out, talking about different fragments here. Basically what they're doing is increasing the number of fragment slots on some of these aspects from 1 to 2. So Bungie thinks that they're underperforming. I can somewhat agree. Trapper's Ambush, Shatter Dive, Gunpowder Gamble. Little surprised to see Gunpowder Gamble on there. I see a lot of people running it, but that could just be because the other options aren't great. Bastion, Juggernaut, Chaos Accelerant. I think for the most part those are good. I don't really main anything other than Warlock. Hunter and Titan get neglected quite a bit, so I'm not overly familiar with Bastion, but I believe that's the one that gives overshields. So, please let me know in the comments if I'm incorrect about that, but I think that may not be as justified if that's the overshield one. But either way, more fragment slots, that just allows for more customization and allows you to use some of these aspects that you might not be going to otherwise. Going into the super tuning, there is a lot of changes here. It's going to be just kind of a completely different game going forward as far as what supers are meta. Starting out though, all supers get 20% extra damage resistance in PvE. For your Wells, Ward of Dawn, stuff like that, it's on cast. For all your other roaming supers, it's while you're in super, as well as on cast. So this is going to be great. It just allows for other supers like Arc Stripper or Spectral Blades, Dawn Break, something like that. It just allows for those to kind of be more viable in-game. Going into some more detailed changes. So for Hunter, both versions of Golden Gun are getting a PvE damage increase of 20%, along with Arc Staff. Arc Staff definitely needed this. Both of the Golden Guns kind of surprised me here. Everyone seems to be on the same page of getting a group of 2 or 3 hunters together with Star Eater scales, and I believe it's the Marksman one or the Deadshot, I forget which. The one that you shoot 3 shots to generate your orbs on a boss. That's kind of busted, so I'm kind of surprised to see that both of those are getting the 20%. It's likely just that it's coded that they fire the same type of bullets, so I don't know. I think that the roaming super version makes more sense to get the damage increase, but that the boss damage one probably could have stayed the same. Spectral Blades, huge buff needed. Nobody runs Spectral Blades in PvE. 35% damage buff, that's great. Heavy attacks now weaken. Okay. I feel like there's a ton of ways to weaken, so this is just an extra way to do it. Not super great, but it's something. And I guess there was an issue with Spectral Blades causing, failing to connect, but again, I don't really run Hunter that often, let alone Spectral Blades. Gathering Storm got some extra damage increase here. This is kind of PvP, so I'm not really sure how this is going to actually play out. So increase the impact damage by 100, increase the lightning strike damage by 200, the tick damage by 20, and it deals increased damage to Well of Radiance and Ward of Dawn. So this is kind of a more counter super upgrade down here, and then this bit here I think kind of applies as well to where it'll break these supers a little bit faster, and if they're inside of it, it might kill you. Like if you're standing in a well, it'll do that increased damage. If you're in the ward, I don't think the impact damage will hit you, but that tick damage might still get you. Alright, for Titan, Fist of Havoc, again PvE damage increases / cost reductions. It's fine. Again, nobody really runs Fist of Havoc in-game PvE that I'm aware of. But also you now get blind on your big slam. So again, kind of like the Weaken, this opens it up a little bit to your roaming super being kind of usable in in-game. It'll kind of come down to testing to see how it actually works out, but it could be pretty cool. Glacial Quake. Again, I don't really run Titan, but this seems like some good changes here. Getting attack speed increase, light damage attack increase. So it seems like your heavy attack's still remaining the same because most of that damage is just based on the shatter, and you're generating those stasis crystals. But now your light attack is actually useful, other than the mobility it provided. Alright, some other minor damage increases, although I don't really know if you can call it minor. Your abilities are getting increased, you know, Sentinel Shield, Hammer Soul, Burning Maul. The big thing about Burning Maul is now it applies Scorch over time. So Hammer Soul was obviously great for ad clear and PvE. Again, I don't know who really ran that, given the other options. Kind of same with Sentinel Shield. Sentinel Shield had a bit more viability just because you could create the wall with your Ursas. But Burning Maul, now it's a bit more of a boss DPS super since it applies Scorch, which will lead to ignitions and also creates that sunspot. So you're pretty good there with a boss DPS super. Alright, getting into Warlocks, a little more familiar territory for me. Nova Warp, got a damage increase. Honestly, I don't know if 15% is enough. We'll see. It also makes things volatile. To me, that's like kind of a okay increase. Again, I'm probably not going to run Nova Warp in any kind of in-game PvE activity, but it's something. Nova Bomb got 20%. Nova Bomb definitely needed to get a damage buff. 20% I think is probably a good amount. No real issues with that. I think that's kind of spot on. It's now potentially going to be a contender with some of the other supers, but also the other supers got buffed as well by, 10 to 20%. So I still think it's going to be underwhelming compared to other supers. Just because if you buff everything, then nothing really changes, Stormcaller Stormcaller got some very needed buffs here. So Storm Trance increased damage by 25%. Tickle Fingers, Palpatine Hands, it needed that for sure. That damage ramp now goes up to starting at 3 seconds from 5, and now your landfall detonation jolts targets. Great changes. I still don't know how many people will run Storm Trance, but Crown of Tempest does exist, so that combination could be useful. It's still not going to be great, I don't think, on single target, but the fact that that damage ramp up now starts at 3 seconds instead of 5, that could be useful. And the jolting of targets, if you landfall on them, could mean that you're doing your single target damage, you're jolting them, so the jolt clears out all the adds that are nearby while you focus on your single target. I could see that being somewhat nice. Chaos Reach also got 25%. Chaos Reach needed a huge buff, and 25% is not bad. Again, we'll see if it makes it worth it, but the big thing here is now sustained damage creates a lightning strike at the target's location that also jolts, according to this. So again, this is going to be your arc super of the boss melting variety. Hopefully it kind of goes back towards its old days where it used to actually be a good boss super option. My problem here is, will the 25% and the jolt lightning be enough? Because the super lasts for fucking ever. It takes so long. And especially if you're running geomags on it, which, it's specifically designed to buff Chaos Reach. So if those lightning strikes do enough damage, I could see this being viable. But if it's really just kind of doing a little bit of extra damage and not anything significant, you're still eating up, 8, 12 seconds of damage dealing time, and that's less shots on target. So I just don't know if Chaos Reach will still be viable after this. In addition to your PvE damage resist, you get 10% against players, you get a little bit more strafe speed, and now you're not going to be body blocking your camera while you're casting your super, which, finally. Winter's Wrath definitely needed a buff here. It's really more of a crowd control super, but it definitely doesn't do that much damage. 10%, I would like to see a little bit more, but it's something. And finally, Daybreak. All they did was tweak the camera, so kind of like up here, you're not going to be body blocking. I'm personally a bit annoyed by this. Daybreak used to be a very great super. Now it's mediocre in my opinion. The fact that you can no longer extend the time by killing ads means it's not a good ad clear super. And it just doesn't stand up to boss damage. Even if you're running, things that buff your Scorch or anything like that, like it just doesn't stand up as a boss damage super, kind of like Chaos Reach. So I think this needed to have a damage buff, or it needed to have its extension built back into it. Because essentially what happened is they took that extension and gave it to Titans, so it's not the fact that they think a projectile solar super being able to extend is a bad thing, they just don't want it on Warlock anymore. So that's my little rant there. So let's go into the Strand updates. So basically we're going to summarize all this as all the Strand melees are getting tuned. They think that there were some issues with them. The Hunter Threaded Spike, it's going to go a little bit further and hit more things before it comes back to you. It's going to do a lot more damage against against PvE combatants, not against players. It's going to come back slower, so it's easier to catch, and it can go through failing shields. It's also not going to be prioritized for grappling, and you get more energy back for catching it. So again, all great things there, nothing really bad. For Titans and Warlock, these first two bullet points are going to apply to you for both of your melees. At 0 charges, your cooldown is going to be reduced 15%, and at 2 charges, cooldown is reduced by 30%. So it's just a little bit of change there. On Titan, Warlock also get the added benefit of getting a faster projectile now, so it's going to come out a little bit faster, going up to 40 from 30, and finishing off at 70 instead of 60. It also gets a little bit better tracking. I know personally I've had issues hitting my melees in PvP. Sometimes people can outrun them. This is going to help in PvP. In PvE, it's not really as big an issue, I don't think. It just means you're going to get your shot on target a little bit faster. Grapple is now going to be available a little more frequently, so they took a huge chunk off that. 23 seconds. That's a huge amount of time, especially when you consider like your bombers, your other ways of cooling that down by picking up Orbs of Power, and especially since now we know that Orbs of Power, you can eventually be able to get those to track to you, so that's going to be huge there. The grapple time between activations is basically non-existent, so you can use your double charges. This is more for hunters, I feel like, or if you're trying to grapple between different points, but you can do that pretty much instantaneously. Threat of generation, we kind of knew this was all coming. Reduced energy generation by any kind of damage over time, and by trace rifles, 36%. Again, we kind of knew this was happening. Wither Horde with threat of generation was just disgusting. And trace rifles, since that's pretty much sustained damage, that's also going down. Auto rifles, I feel like, will still be pretty good for this, but any kind of damage over time, it's unfortunate, but we all knew it was coming. Alright, going into Stasis. So now Hunters, with your Withering Blade, it's going to have a better chance to bounce at players, and it's going to have better tracking, and it's going to have 12.5% increased tracking strength if you want a specific number, but basically you're going to be hitting more often. Shiver Strike on Titans, you're now pretty much just going to be going a little bit faster, and gravity's going to affect you 18% less. Howl of the Storm, I actually am not super familiar with this one, but it increases the width of its freezing cone by 31% against players. So again, you're just going to have an easier chance of hitting players with that. Frost Pulse now provides 2 meters of additional melee lunge range after activation for a little over a second. This is huge because it's always been the issue with Frost Pulse is following up with that melee. Whenever I freeze somebody, they seem to only stay frozen for 0.2 seconds before they thaw out. So getting that additional melee range is going to be huge, and I can see myself running Stasis in PvP a lot more often now. Alright, some light club subclass tuning. This is something that I've been kind of hoping for, because it's just been a major annoyance in general. I know Titans are going to be upset with this, but Seismic Strike, Shield Bash, and Hammer Strike, pretty much all of your shoulder charges, now actually use a little bit of melee energy. Boo-hoo, I know. It's only 15%, so be glad it's not more. This should have easily been 40-50% in my opinion. Your base cooldown is also now standardized, so it's actually going to be faster to get your cooldown back. So it's a little bit of a trade-off. You can't shoulder charge around the map, but you also get your melee back a little bit faster. This is a positive change in my opinion, so I know Titans mains are going to be a little sad at it, but I think it's a good change overall. Knockout is getting a slight nerf in its melee lunge range, so it's being reduced by 1 meter. That's not the biggest of deals. The main thing is that you still get your health regen on it, so you're good there. And then uncharged melee PvE damage bonus increased, so you're doing now double damage instead of 60%. Shield throw got a slight damage increase. It's got a better time of finding a target, especially after a bounce. And throwing hammers, so it also gets a little bit of aim assist now on your throwing hammer, so you're probably not going to lose your hammer as often. Sol Invictus, sunspot damage increases to 22 per tick to enemy players, so sunspots are going to be better in PvP. Hunters, Snare Bomb, increased PvE weaken duration by double, holy shit, okay, so 8 seconds now. Throwing knives, so proximity knives now get a weaker detonation, but better on impact. So they want the knives to be a little bit more standardized, since everyone was always using prox knives or weighted throwing knives, and the lightweight knife was pretty much neglected. So proximity knives, you actually have to aim now if you want to do that extra damage. Weighted throwing knives, again, this is kind of not tuning on the damage, but tuning on the tracking. So it's 25% worse tracking, but increased tracking size by 10%. So it's, and the shape grows. So it's basically saying that when you throw your heavy throwing knife, its tracking is going to be reduced the closer you are, but the further away you are, it's going to get a little bit bigger, but generally you're going to have worse tracking on the weighted throwing knife. And then the lightweight knife, it's going to go faster by 10 meters per second, and its tracking size shape is increased by 20%. So no tracking adjustment as far as how hard it's going to track, but it's going to start tracking 20% further away, or if you're like 20% off to the side. So it's going to just have a bigger radius for when it can start to track. Then Gunpowder Gamble has now a reduced cooldown to 6 seconds, so it's going to be half as long, in addition to that extra fragment slot. So Gunpowder Gamble getting a pretty good buff there. Warlock, they fixed an issue with Incinerator Snap to where some of the projectiles were not activating based on their proximity to target. But the main thing here is you got a damage nerf. So it's getting reduced damage here. But it's supposedly going to be dramatically increased consistency because of the increase to proximity explosion. So now you're going to get basically more damage consistency because they're going to be exploding in a proximity. So you'll hit basically 3 explosions on them instead of like maybe 1 or 2. But they're going to be doing less damage. We'll see how this shapes out. I still don't see myself using Incinerator Snap in PvP. I honestly don't use it ever. There's like a very select build I do it for in PvE. Ball Lightning increased PvE damage by 30%, and it's not going to knock them back as much when you're amplified. This is great. Ball Lightning was always a problem as far as like its damage consistency and damage output, so I'm glad to see that that got adjusted here. Chaos Accelerant. With Scatter Grenade, you're going to get increased tracking, increased submunition aiming duration, arming duration, and fixed a bug where they were impacting on ground, causing premature explosions. Couldn't be me, you know? This sounds great. I'm curious to see if this is only for Chaos Accelerant, or if it's going to apply to all Scatter Grenades in general, as far as these 3 bullet points here. Nothing Manticles could see an increase in use here now in PvP. We'll have to do some testing to see if that's actually viable, but that's an interesting change. And now your Magnetic Grenade, which turns into your handheld Supernova, you can hold for almost a full 1.5 seconds longer, 1.3 seconds. So that's pretty nice. It's now you've got a little bit more options, and like you can hold it just in case somebody's trying to push you around a corner. Lightning Surge, I never experienced this because not too many people run Arc anymore in PvP, but apparently there was an issue where you could one-shot somebody if they're standing too close to a wall or a doorway or something. That's now being addressed and fixed. It's going to do a little bit less damage and shouldn't one-shot somebody. So overall, some good changes. One-shotting in PvP is a pretty big annoyance of mine, pretty big pet peeve, so I'm glad that that's getting fixed. Alright, last thing here, some keyword tuning updates. Scorch now starts to fall off a little bit later, 0.8 seconds on players, and a full 1.5 seconds on PvE combatants, so that's pretty huge. Jolt is going to do an overall 15% less damage against PvE combatants, and the bonus that it had against majors is getting scaled back by 20%. So I hope those two don't stack, but if it does, it basically means that Jolt is going to be kind of standardized and just weaker across the board. It seems like it's still going to proc as frequently. They're not changing its frequency, but just its damage output. This means that just because you jolt one thing, doesn't mean it's going to clear out the entire room. Again, overall a solid change, because Jolt was very overpowered. It's still going to be great, and it seems like they're just trying to bring it in line a little bit. So, not too upset by it. 15%, it's not the worst. It's okay in my mind. The finally last thing we have here is the speed booster from being amplified. Your extra jump is going down to 1.25 instead of 1.5, but now it activates sooner, 0.5 seconds sooner while you sprint, and it lingers a little bit longer, 0.5 seconds longer. So now basically your amplified movement is just going to be a little bit better and overall easier to manage. You're not going to be jumping all the way into the atmosphere, and you can, come out of your run to punch something or do something, and then you can start running again while staying amplified. And yeah, so that's going to be the entire patch notes that are coming out. Again, this is all for Season 21, so it's going to be coming out in a few weeks. Let me know in the comments below if there's something I missed, or if there's some kind of interpretation that you think was game-changing that I didn't cover, or if I just had a bad interpretation. Just let me know your thoughts. But with that being said, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.